Hey everybody, welcome to the Herd Fit Podcast with Dr. Sam Marie and myself, Coach David Syvertsen. This podcast is aimed at helping anyone and everyone looking to enhance their healthy lifestyle through fitness, nutrition, and most importantly, mindset. All right, welcome back to the Herd Fit Podcast. I am Coach David Syvertsen. I am not here with my co-host, Dr. Coach Sam Marie. I am here with a special guest today. This is Coach at CrossFit Bison, Brian DeCarlo. Brian, what's up, my man?
What's happening?
He is going to, we're going to touch on a really key component to the future of Bison. Also something that Brian does more than anybody on our staff, and it's been that way for a long time. And that is personal training. He's also our kind of like our Olympic lifting coach, kind of our specific Olympic lifting coach. And we have some plans for the future in regard to that and him. But Brian, before we get into that, I really kind of want to intro you because not everyone that listens is from Bison. And even the people that are from Bison, they might not take the Wednesday morning class. They might come midday, they might come at night, and they see you a couple times a year. They see you in the coaches' pictures. So I kind of want you to briefly kind of touch on some of your, what we call the CrossFit start story, a little bit of brief background on why, when, how, and how we're sitting here right now.
Yeah, for sure. One day watching ESPN, I saw the CrossFit Games. It's maybe 2012 on TV, and it looked interesting. I played football in college, and I always trained hard to try to be better at football. Getting out of college, it kind of got monotonous at the gym. I started to look for something, and this was it. Someone local opened up a gym, and the rest is kind of history.
That's a really common CrossFit start story for the former athlete. Is, at some point you get told that you're not going to be in the NFL someday, and it's not that you're waking up every day wanting to compete anymore. If anything, I know a lot of, especially college football players, that you're like, dude, I'm kind of done with that training routine and playing through pain, fighting through pain, training all year. But there's still something that kind of makes you feel alive, something that you're really going for. And some guys find it at the Globo gym with their curls and bench press and just lifting a lot of weights and looking at themselves in the mirror and loving that feeling. Others join men's leagues and, kickball, flag football, softball, all that stuff. You found CrossFit, and because you watch it on ESPN, which is such a common story for people in our age group, like late 30s, early 40s, that you saw it on ESPN, and not necessarily like, hey, I can do that one day, but you're just intrigued by it. What was the most intriguing part about that, watching it on ESPN? Like, was it, hey, I want to do that someday? Or is it, hey, that just looks cool and hard, and I think I have the skill set for it?
Well, I knew I was athletic enough to do some of the things they were doing. I was still, at the time, maybe 26, 27 years old. I was gaining weight. I didn't like the way I looked. And looking at the bodies of the guys doing CrossFit, I'm like, geez, I can maybe get to that point at some point. And again, when my wife Nicole and I started, we took we went in head first, full paleo. We went to three different grocery stores to do our shopping. This is before kids. And I mean, Nicole lost about 15 pounds. I lost like 30 pounds.
Wow.
And, we started to look and feel great. And it just snowballed from there into wanting to, help others, achieve the same things that we did. So that's kind of where I got into coaching.
And I kind of want to add in some of my personal history with Brian, because I think that's equally important for everyone to know that we didn't meet in the CrossFit space. Out of all the Bison current and past community, there's very few people that I've known for as long as I have Brian, and vice versa. Brian and I, we both grew up in Midland Park, so I moved here in 95. Brian was a year above me, but basically since 1995, we've known each other through sports. His cousin was one of my really good friends in high school that we played sports growing up together. And Brian and I crossed paths mainly in high school with sports. So I was a pitcher in high school. That was like my thing growing up. I played all different sports, but pitching was my thing. And if I ever see myself coaching a sport down the road, it would be, as much as I love football, it would be baseball, and it would be pitching biased. And they also they often call in baseball the pitcher's mound the loneliest place in the world, and it's a figure of speech in that in baseball you can hide in right field, you can hide at third base, you never have a ball hit into you, you can strike out 4 times and your team can still score 30 runs. When you're a pitcher in baseball, there's a lot of pressure on you, a lot of eyes on you. Every play starts with you. If you do well, your team does great usually. If you don't do well, your team gets smoked. And there's a lot of pressure there. And when you're a pitcher, there's one person on the field that can help you the most, and it's the catcher. And I played on a lot of baseball teams growing up, some really good teams too, with a lot of good players, and a couple guys that went on to play in the pros. And to this day, I would say my favorite / best catcher I ever had was Brian. Brian was my catcher. And the more I reflect on my childhood growing up with him and playing sports with him, it goes to show like why he is a good coach and why he is trustworthy. Because as a catcher, you have to be so many things. You got to be smart. You got to be in tune. You got to be, have to read body language and know situations. You have to have a great recall. You need to be able to, remember things from 3 years ago, very subtle details. You also, personality-wise, need to wear a few different hats. You need to be a therapist. You need to like pick someone up when they're down. You also need to tell someone to stop being a little bitch when they're scared or something. And you think about like what a CrossFit coach is, what a personal trainer is. You kind of have to do that too. And when you're a catcher, you're a catcher to a lot of different pitchers. And Brian's probably caught hundreds of pitchers in his day. They all have different personalities, different strengths and weaknesses. And I loved having Brian. It's like when you get older, you appreciate things more when you get older than you did back then. And Brian we were also linebackers next to each other in football. And if I ever die and my brain says, oh, they have CTE or some sort of brain damage, Brian's going to get a notice in the mail from a lawyer saying he gave me 3 of my first 4 concussions. Sorry about that. But there's a history here. And I wanted to just put that out there before we dive into the meat of today's topic, because we've discussed a lot what makes a good CrossFit coach, what makes a bad CrossFit coach, what makes someone that could be good for a long time. Because it's not easy to be a good coach for a long time in professional sports, but also in CrossFit boxes. So, Brian, do you ever look back on your athletic experiences as a team captain, as a catcher, as a linebacker? He was the general of our defense back in the day, right? Do you think that really has bled into your coaching career and teaching career? Because Brian's also a teacher.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, playing those 2 positions, linebacker and catcher, you're the captain on the field. You're, directing what the defense is going to do. You're directing what the defense on the baseball field is going to do. You're working with the pitcher. You're trying to call the game. Coach Ewing sometimes let me call the game. Sometimes he called the pitches himself. But and being able to work with a lot of different personalities, being able to know when to calm someone down, knowing when you have to rev someone up. It all bleeds in. And I also coached football. I coached wrestling at the high school level as a defensive coordinator. And again, being able to kind of know how different people tick, it definitely bleeds into coaching CrossFit and being able to, pat someone on the back and say, it's okay. Like, don't worry about that last lift, or being able to say, hey, put 10 more pounds on the bar. You're being a bitch. That bar moved really fast. I don't care how it felt. It moved. Just trust me.
Yep.
Again, it all bleeds together. I think my coaching career made me a better CrossFit coach. I think being a CrossFit coach made me a better football coach, and teacher for that matter. I say sometimes teaching, kindergartners is easier than teaching a group full of adults. Getting them to listen sometimes is easier than getting 40, 50-year-old people to listen. But
for sure,
all those things kind of blend together and have kind of molded the coach that I am.
Yeah, I think that for the sake of our future, we both have kids, and that's when you are looking at it from a perspective of a parent, you really do value how important a coach is and a teacher is. And I remember having completely different thoughts, or I didn't even say different thoughts, I would say strengthened thoughts and notions during COVID, when a lot of people really found out how important the teachers are for kids. And, unfortunately, it took a scenario like that for a lot of people to realize like how like they're not just important, they're vital. They are a vital, components of our society. And everyone kind of knows it, but you really have to kind of keep that front and center. And I want to kind of keep that thought fresh in our head as we dive into this topic. And the topic is personal training and specific coaching, or specific areas of coaching for CrossFit. A lot of CrossFit athletes, not all, but a lot of CrossFit athletes, members of gyms, they have some history of having a personal trainer. And if you know anything about the business model of personal training, if you work out 3, 4, 5 days a week with a personal trainer, you are spending a massive amount of money. In the past and currently, I know people that spend 12 to 15 grand a year on personal training. And to some, that's mind-numbing, but that's actually pretty general market. And there's a lot of personal trainers that you're paying a lot more. Basically, when you get one-on-one attention, every time you go to the gym, it's 30, 45, 60 minutes, and you talk about hourly rates and what personal trainers need to sustain, their livelihood. That's how much it is. And at some point, some people just cannot afford that. And then as CrossFit exploded, one of the angriest groups of people on the face of the earth were personal trainers because, a lot of people said, hey, economically, I'm still getting the coaching. I'm not by myself. And it cost me $200 a month instead of $1,500 a month. Why would I not do that? And, Brian does both. Brian coaches CrossFit and he does personal training. He's done more personal training than any coach on our staff since we've been open. Brian, and no bias, just like let it rip here. Who is the person that needs personal training the most in a CrossFit gym? You can kind of keep the outsiders away from now. We'll get to them. But within a CrossFit gym, who are the people that need it the most?
The people who need it the most, I would say beginners. There's kind of two groups of people who need it. Beginners who, they really need to be at the 6 a.m. class.
Right.
Okay, the 6 a.m. class, if you take 6 a.m., you're clicking reserve at 6 o'clock on the dot to make sure you get your spot. And there's, it's consistently filled with 30 people.
Yeah.
And as great as our coaching staff is, you cannot give the attention to 30 people that you would, at a 7:15 class with 5 people.
Yep.
So I think beginners, you've kind of tried to be like, hey, these are the classes that you might want to go to in the beginning, at least.
Just had a conversation with a couple last night on the phone they're going to try it out this week. And I said, what time do you work out? I'm like, sometimes in the morning. I'm like, hey, I honestly would recommend you not come at 6 a.m. And they get it. They understand. But it's hard to learn when you're new in a group that big.
Yeah, it's hard to let it makes it very difficult on the coach because you're spending a lot. You're going to be biased towards those new people.
Yep.
Spend a lot of time with them, and kind of the rest of the class is going to miss out a bit. So those new members, the new CrossFitter who kind of wants to speed that process along of learning, because when you're one-on-one, I'm spending 45 to 60 minutes looking at you. I'm not distracted by any of the other members who I'm coaching in a class. The other group of people are the group who are want to take it to the next level. They're they're pretty good. They're at the top of the whiteboard a lot of the days, but they're missing a little something. They're missing some strength in their Olympic lifting. They're missing some technique or they have the strength and the technique isn't there where someone who has similar strength is lifting a lot more than them and beating them in competitions. So I think those two groups are kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. But I think anyone can really benefit from one-on-one sessions, even if it's just like, hey, I really want to work on my muscle ups. Can you set me up with someone for just one session or 2 sessions to, clean them up a little bit? Because, sometimes it's just one cue from one coach and all of a sudden it clicks. And you're able to do things that you didn't realize you can do.
Yeah, and I think that's like the predominant answer that I want everyone to take away. Personal training can be and should be for everyone if circumstances can allow. Your schedule, the money, all that. When I started CrossFit, I did 2 personal training sessions during the open because there was a week where this is before RX and scaled in the open. It was just, here's the workout, guys. It was 30 snatches at 75, 30 at 135, 30 at 165, max at 205. A lot of people would get to that second barbell and either not be able to lift it, or you would just be getting 1 rep every 15 seconds. And I remember doing it, getting smoked by that 135 barbell, and I lined up a personal training session the next day with one of the coaches there, $60 for a half hour, warm up on your own, show up, we work on snatches, helped a little bit, beat my score the next time. But I was the new guy in the gym at that point, where I wanted to work hard, but I just didn't know how to do things. And I always say on the podcast and when I coach, the amount of skill in CrossFit is part of what sets it apart. But until you adopt that mindset that there is a skill in everything you do, including the ring muscle up, which is obvious, but then also your rowing, your biking, your bar facing burpees, your wall balls, there's a skill component to every single thing you do. And you only develop skill by doing it over and over and over again correctly. Not doing it over and over again, but doing it over and over again correctly. And for you to really understand the components to what does correct actually mean, more often than not, you either need a personal trainer or you got to go spend a lot of time on YouTube. And even then, you're still kind of thinking, you ever try to teach yourself something and you're like I'm trying to teach myself how to snowplow. And I'm like, am I doing it right? Like, I think I am.
It's like the worst thing ever is to go on YouTube right before a golf outing and think that you're going to drive the ball 350 yards.
Yep.
But with lifting, I watch people and I'm like, if I'm taking class, I'm like, brace. Yeah, like little things and it's hard not to turn that coaching mindset off.
Yeah.
But there's little subtleties that are in every movement. That you can make more efficient. Everyone can make more efficient.
Very good point. Yeah.
It's just how it is. I mean, even the top guys, once they fatigue, their form breaks down.
Yep.
It's going to happen. They just get better and better at being able to do those things while fatigued and be as efficient as possible. I mean, the guys I don't know, maybe not the most fit guys win, but the guys who are able to be most efficient.
Yep.
While being under fatigue.
Yep. I mean, that's a huge part. We see here on a daily basis. Like, you can be fit, you can look the greatest, but if you can't keep your shit together when you're really tired, things start to break down, and it's almost like adding weight to a barbell that didn't need added weight. Like, it just, everything becomes harder. Every little thing becomes harder if the skill isn't there. Now, I've seen you personal train athletes that are brand new or people that don't CrossFit. Okay, we're going to dive into them in a little bit. But I actually think one of the most underdeveloped markets in personal training within CrossFit is the highly experienced athlete. And sometimes it's like, hey, just don't feel like doing it. Hey, I don't want to pay my money for that. Like, I already spend a lot of money to come here. But if you are not in that camp, if you do have some extra disposable income, if you do have the extra time and the willingness, I think that there's a lot of people. I can think of 10 people right now off the top of my head that would benefit from just 2 or 3 sessions, or maybe 1 session every 2 months of meeting at the gym. You can do a couple like weakness work, or just a consultation, a talk. Watch me do a workout. Hey, let's rest 5 minutes. Go over the video. Let's do it again, or watch me lift. Touch on, because you really have worked with a lot of different experience levels, especially with your O-League class, which we'll get to. But do you agree that some of these people that have been doing it a long time, they do know their stuff, and you can actually start on level 6 instead of level 1 with these guys and really kind of take that game to the next level? Like, if I came to you, I have a lot of experience with CrossFit, and I was like, hey, Brian, I really want you to help me work on my squat, snatch, and my cleans for the Open and quarterfinals this year. Let's spend 5 sessions together. Can you kind of describe what the difference is between working with someone like that and someone who just obviously started off and who needs help learning how to air squat?
Right. Well, someone who's just starting off, you're looking for like gross errors, like just no, not disgusting errors, but like big errors.
Yeah, obvious.
And you can fix those pretty easily. And like when I'm working with someone new, I'm looking for them to move safely.
Right.
All right. We're moving safely. Let's start to like chip away at the subtleties of the movement. Right. Like I would say everyone who starts bends their elbow early.
Yeah.
On
for
any
sure.
Olympic lift.
Yeah.
And I'm not worried about that until they're moving safely. Right now, let's get to the next part. Someone like you who is experienced, who moves well, you know, you find much finer errors in the lift,
Right.
and sometimes it's just that lift, and sometimes it's, you know, if you see it over and over and over again, it's all right, let's tweak this, let's make sure we're doing it right. And sometimes it takes you know, some humility from the athlete
Yeah.
to like, all right, let me take down some weight and do it right at a lighter weight so that I can build it back up. You know, unfortunately, if you're, you know, if you're an experienced athlete, unlearning a bad technique takes just as much time as building it back up and getting to where you want to be. So it takes time, it takes some humility. But for someone who's experienced, you're going to look for much, you know, much smaller imperfections in the lift that will, you know, eventually help. You know, if you find enough of them, you know, those 1%, eventually they're going to add up, and you're going to find yourself, you know, lifting more than you previous would, or lifting the same, just doing it more efficiently and being able to do it under duress and those kind of things.
Yeah, the gains you make as an experienced athlete are just so much smaller. Like you look like centimeters, half inches at a time. Like, you know, and when you're new, like that's with any CrossFitter, you make such big gains early on, and then that rate of increase just does not hold up. But yeah, I think one of the hardest components to personal training or giving specific instruction to an experienced CrossFitter is that they really have to like be aware and present with the concept that the gains they're making are not going to be enormous. You know, you're not going to figure something out and add 20 pounds to your snatch tomorrow. But what you could do is make every snatch you do safer and a little bit more efficient so that the gains can eventually come. But a beginner, you could probably fix their bar placement on their front squat, and their squat goes up 20 pounds. Like, you're not going to do that with an experienced athlete.
Right. I mean, it's a lot of fun working with new athletes because the gains are just,
Yeah.
they're so quick, and they're like, people get excited. They see results.
Yep.
When you're working with someone with experience. I mean, I've had people who they signed up for a session, and I think they were disappointed that they didn't PR in that session. And I'm like, and like never called me back. I'm like, I don't take offense, or I don't take it personally, but I'm like, listen, it takes time. Like if you're looking to improve, it's not going to happen overnight. You need to put in the work, and it's going to take some time, and it takes some trust too. Like, you know, if you trust that I know what I'm doing, you know, take down some weight, let's build it back up, and eventually, you know, those big lifts will come.
Yeah.
Again, I working with the newer athletes is so much fun because you see so many gains.
Yeah.
And then you get, I mean, it can be a little nerve-wracking working with someone with experience because, you know, they work with you 5, 6, 7 sessions, and nothing's
Right.
You know, they haven't made any gains yet. And, you know, if you trust the process, they will come. And, you know, sometimes it's not, you know, it's not a lifetime PR, especially as we get older.
Right.
Sometimes it's just moving better. I can overhead squat where I used to have to power snatch every single rep. Or I can get lower I can get out of the hole in the clean. But again, there's small, subtle changes that take a lot of time to do. Like you said, as the more into this you get, the smaller the PRs, the less often they happen, you know, if at all at this point.
Yep. And it's you know, chase the pursuit of chasing objective results for subjective, right? Like objective is your PR, your times are better. Subjective is like, hey, you're moving better, you feel better, you look better. You know, I have an athlete in the gym who says, I haven't lost a pound in 2 years that I've been here, but she looks completely different. And, you know, that kind of ties into our in-body machine that we have right behind us is, you know, there's more to making gains in fitness than how much you weigh. And it could be what you look like, your body fat percentage, your muscle mass, your lean muscle mass, everything can kind of be tied into it. But if you're only looking at one thing, right? If you're only looking at your lifts and your PRs, it's short-sighted, and it doesn't mean as much as you always think it does, especially as you experience. How about this? One of the underutilized tools that experienced athletes use is personal training. But you also want to know what group also gets tied into that is coaches. How important is it for a coach to have a coach? You know, like one thing I love as a CrossFit coach is we have a lot of our coaches work out in our classes, and it's great to see them in there for a lot of different reasons. But I know myself as an athlete in one of your classes or in any of our classes with our coaches, I always try to pick up something from them. based on who's coaching and what that day is and what the movements are. And do you think coaches, not even just in this gym, just in general, how important it is for them to seek coaching themselves?
Well, it's vital. I mean, if you want to improve it all,
Yeah.
it would be very arrogant to think that you don't need to be coached. You don't need, fine tuning on your movements. I personally don't record my workouts, so I could be not, I can think I'm doing everything right and not, unless someone like Dave or another coach comes up to me and says, "Hey, your wall balls," and I've dealt with knee injuries,
Yep.
and I would sometimes go up to the coaching class, like, can you just make sure I'm getting my depth because I'm just coming back.
Yeah.
But being able to be humble enough to take coaching, I think is vital. I think you'd be crazy not, especially when you have a group of coaches like we do who know what they're doing. I think the other side of that is being a coach in a class with your coaches and having being comfortable going up to them and coaching them, because a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot, there are times where I'm like, God, do they want to hear from me? Do they, like, I don't know, are they just moving today? Like,
Is there a mutual understanding here that you don't have to lock out your elbow?
yeah, right, exactly. And I remember one time I was doing, I forgot, I was doing like dumbbell snatches or something. Like, can you get the dumbbell back a little bit? So, it's a little in front of your head. I'm like, oh shit, sorry. But again, it's for coaches, we absolutely need, and I think all of us want to be coached. Anytime Dave gives me a cue or anyone else in the class, especially some of those newer coaches who, they're fresh off their L1, they're excited to be able to like spot flaws. And if they, they hit me with something, I'm like, cool. Like I accept it and love, having the feedback from someone else's eyes.
Yeah. And I mean, you can look at it from two advantages here. If you're an athlete getting coached, like and you trust the coach, it's going to help you out. But I'll be honest with you, I think coaches also view taking coaching as, I'm going to use that. Like we beg, borrow, and steal from each other all the time, and sometimes coaches feel a little uncomfortable and they feel like, oh, well, I learned this from this person, so that's why I'm going to tell you that. No, like I always tell people, just beg, borrow, and steal. Everyone does that. And every coach, in any industry, honestly, is what you learn from others. You kind of reflect on it, and then you put your spin on it, and then you put it out for others to consume. That's a big part of taking coaching as well. And that's what, as a coach, I think it's a borderline, not even borderline, it's a responsibility to take in coaching, and A, to help yourself, but B, to help others. And that's where I think that we do a pretty good job here, but it's something I think a coach should understand out there in any walk of fitness, that I do think you should seek coaching, maybe even seek personal training, seek a session with someone, and try to really kind of help that improve your craft and your brand as a coach. Now, when it comes to, this is something I'm actually curious to hear about. You have some clients that are not CrossFitters. I would even maybe say, from my perspective, majority, or at least half. And when I say not CrossFitters, meaning like they're not members at a CrossFit gym, but they come here, they do their thing. What's your philosophy on that? Do you have one? Like, if we put this episode out and you get an inquiry from some random person that we went to high school with, like, hey, Brian, I want to come to Bison to personal train with you. Do you put a CrossFit spin on it? Or is it, hey, I'm going to train this person and maybe just, kind of keep CrossFit out? Like, you're not doing a Fran with them, but you are kind of doing some of the movements. Like, where do you find the blend of the two?
It depends.
Okay.
If someone comes to me looking for sports specific training, then I'm going to train them to be as strong and powerful within that sport.
Got it.
If hockey players, I'm going to do a lot of rotational stuff, right? Like football players, I'm going to do a lot of explosive, fast sets with a long break.
Yeah, so they're not doing like Cindy 20-minute AMRAP type stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm not going to go have them, like when we were in high school, like, oh, let's get ready for football. Let's go run a couple miles. Like that, those days, are over. It's not effective. It's not, smart training. That being said, someone else who is just looking to get in a little better shape, I absolutely use CrossFit methodology. It's,
Okay.
It's what we do here. It's what I believe in. It's not going to be the same, it's not like I'm putting him through a CrossFit class, but, I try to mix, vary the movements. I try to vary, the lengths of the workout. I try to, make them as fit as possible. If just, general physical preparedness is their goal. And I talk to them beforehand, of course. If they want to put on a massive amount of muscle mass, then that's going to be different than someone who wants to lose as much weight as possible. So either way, I do put, some of the CrossFit methodology into it, because it's, it changed my life. It changed the trajectory of my fitness journey. And it's, it's what I love. If, again, if people are looking for something specific, like to gain muscle mass, to get better at sport, then, we tailor their programming to that.
That's a huge advantage of personal training is, when you're a CrossFit gym member, even if it's a great CrossFit gym, a great programming, you're still kind of restricted / a victim to what the whole gym is doing. And yes, there's levels, there's RX scale, but you're still doing the workouts. GPP is what we call it. Yes, we prepare for the open and benchmark workouts here and there, but at the end of the day, it's just general physical preparedness. And if you have a very specific goal, that is where CrossFit training and programming, in terms of your day-to-day workout regimen, that might not be the best route for you to take. If you do want to just put muscle on, if you do want to just burn fat, if you just want to get stronger, there probably is some extra attention that you need in addition or in place of a general CrossFit program. So let's kind of tie that to another kind of specialty of yours, and something that we're going to be rolling out on a more common basis for you and with you. And it's the Olympic lifting course. And, we're in our second run with this right now. And we've kind of had Olympic lifting classes here and there. It's never been like a very, not a very consistent component to our program. It's kind of like, hey, when we can do it. We have some plans for that in the future with Brian. But before we wrap this up, can you touch on what you like and what you're personally getting out of, and what others are getting out of this Olympic lifting class that meets once a week with you, to just focus on that component of CrossFit?
So we're working on, again, we're looking at Olympic lifting, and in a regular Olympic lifting program, your goal is to lift as much weight over your head in the clean and jerk or the snatch as possible.
Yep.
So it's not that. It's tied into CrossFit. So this past week we had a barbell cycling class. If you talk to an Olympic weightlifting coach, they're going to laugh at you if you said you're doing barbell cycling. But for us, it's something that is effective.
It's a huge part, yeah.
So we did sets of 6, sets of 5, sets of 4, sets of 3 with less and less rest. And you can see how it affected everybody. And my point is, it's just a little bit different than like a regular Olympic weightlifting cycle. And what members are getting out of it, they're getting the specialized programming. I think we've had 8 or 9 in each of the classes. And what I've tried to do is split them up, have one group on one side, and I do everything on a clock. So I'm like, all right, this side, go.
Yeah.
I can look at everyone on that side,
right.
This side, go.
Because there's a lot of rest. You're not doing 30 burpees between sets.
Correct. It's only either a lift or a complex of lifts.
Got it.
For each set, and we're doing each set once every 2.5 minutes, with the exception of the barbell cycling.
Okay.
And we can fine tune. And sometimes people are like, I really want to go for it. And I'm like, all right, as long as it looks good and looks safe, then let's go for it. Some people are like, I'm going to stay light today. I really want you to focus in. We talked about hip contact last week. Can you really look and make sure that I'm getting that hip contact? I'm like, yeah, all right, you're getting the hip contact. Now let's get to the next level and hip contact and finish. Now, and again, it's getting people to move safely and then chip away at the little imperfections of their lifts. And I think it's a perfect group of people with some experience, people who lift well, who just want to get, a little bit better and more efficient at the lift. Dave H is someone who comes to mind, because he was in the first group, and I got him to get the bar to his hips.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, it looked awesome. How'd it feel? And he was wide-eyed. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, that was a PR. And I'm like,
yeah.
it didn't look like a PR.
Yeah,
It looked like you can do 5 more reps. He's like, no, this is awesome. Like, so it feels good. Like,
and he's been doing CrossFit a long time.
yes. He's he did the first session. He's doing this session also.
Nice.
But seeing people make those breakthroughs, like one little thing can click. I was working, I worked with Dan Dodd on Olympic lift, and he was my coach. And I was talking about coaches being coached. One cue just like, put my snatch over the edge. And he said, don't hope the bar gets to where it has to be, put it where it has to be.
Got it.
And that just like, for whatever reason, people have probably said that to me in various different ways.
Yep.
But that little cue, it made it work. On the other side of that, trying to coach my wife, Nicole, I'll tell her to do something. She's like, no, I am doing that. And I'm like, no. And it becomes an argument. Listen, Nicole, I love you. I'm not coaching you. Like, go talk to Dave, go talk to someone. I'm not doing it. But again,
been there.
So some people just, they might go to Dave. He might say the same thing over and over and over again. And I put it just a little different.
Yep.
And it clicks, right? So I encourage people to seek out different coaches because again, I'm not, I'm humble enough to know that there's someone out there who might be a better fit for an athlete. But as far as our Olympic lifting course, I think that people get, specialized training in just the Olympic lifts. They don't have to worry again about doing box jumps or burpees or pull-ups in between. They just get to hone in on the lifts, which for me is my favorite part of CrossFit and really always has been.
Yeah, and that's the area that you're very, very good in. Just snatched. Would you snatch last week? Was it 225 or 35? Sorry, you missed 235.
Just
you had it. Yeah. Yeah, no, he's a great lifter. Combination. I mean, when we hired him years ago, one of the kind of like, I don't know, selling points, if you want to call it that, but one thing we always said about it, he's like, yeah, he's really strong, but he also moves really well, and that's not actually been doing this a long time. It's not a very common combination. A lot of people either are biased towards moving well, but they're not that strong, and other people are really strong, but they don't move that well, and that's what makes Olympic lifting very hard. I think it's important to know that if that is an area that you really want to get better at, you can get better at it in classes, but it's the rate of progress in a specific class, such as the one that Brian runs, is significant. You are going to get better faster, and it's partially because of the coaching, less like a little bit more attention on just like these little fine points, but you're not doing it in a workout. Like, I know we're very much aware that it's hard to really get better at lifting if you're exhausted from other things. It just is. Like, I just did a workout that had toes to bar, ski erg, and heavy cleans. And like, I know like some of my movements started to break down a little bit towards the end. Like, I started really widening my feet out when I caught it, wasn't catching it in the right spot. I wasn't getting my hip contact. And it's because you just lose body awareness of where the bar is going because you're so tired in other areas. So I think that it's kind of a no-brainer if you really do want to get better at lifting, and this goes for you coaches as well. You should do one of these 6-week periods with Brian. You have to try to find the schedule to time. It might be next year, it might be the better time than right now, but I think it's a really important thing. I've done a lot of stuff with Dan Dodd over the years. I've taken classes by Brian. I've taken classes by Dallas. I know I've had online programs. You kind of have to dive into that. And what makes it hard from a CrossFit coach and programming perspective is, we do have lifting days, but a lot of times it's mixed in with other stuff. And I fall victim to it as a programmer. It's like, you want to make sure it's fun for everyone because not everyone wants to get better at lifting. They just want to work out. And so that I can say this right now. If you really want to get better at lifting, you're probably gonna have to do one of these classes, these 6-week periods.
I would agree. And going back to your, the programmed lifts, like, being able to, having the freedom to set your rest period as much as you want. Like, and it's funny because the snatch, I think on the EMOM for me anyway, like if I'm trying to get to a heavy lift, it actually takes the thought out of it, I think.
Yep.
But clean and jerk, I need time. Like I cannot, if I'm going on the minute, there's no way I'm getting to, a volume or a weight that I'm looking for. It's just, and I get it. Like we have to get a lift in a workout, or we're trying to get a lift in a workout. But in the Olympic lifting class, if the goal is to lift heavy, then we're going to give you plenty of time to rest. And, and sometimes the class it's between an hour and an hour, 15, 20 minutes sometimes. So we have the time to, you can sit down, bring a chair if you want, sit down between your sets so that you can fully recover and get to the next lift. That's one of the, I don't want to say a complaint, but if I had to change anything where we're lifting in class, I'm like, man, the EMOMs suck.
They do. They're tough with the weights. Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the biggest challenges to programming, like lifting days at the gym, is, and you'll see it in our programming sometimes, is like, hey guys, do these weights 2 or 3 times and then add weight. And part of that is because, like, if you're changing weights after every set, you're just going to be rushed and you don't really get what you need to out of that session.
Yeah. So, or you have someone who does 135, 135, 135, 245. Yeah. It's like, all right, I did 245 every set, but okay.
Yep. Yeah. And it's a different mindset too. Like, if you sign up for that class and it's a specialty class and it's just Olympic lifting, like, that is what your mind is. And everyone that's in that room is there for that reason. Where if you have 145 people come to the gym in a day, 120 of them are be like, I don't want to just come in and just lift. Like, I'm not going to come here if that's what we do every Monday and every Tuesday, that kind of thing. But at the same time, if they really do want to get stronger, it's kind of like a near mandatory approach to it. So yeah, that's like that whole programming, how to put this into classes. It's a complex situation, and I think one of the solutions is exactly this, is you have a class that is just for lifting. You have a coach that wants to really devote his time and energy into that. And, as time passes, we'll put more information out to the CrossFit Bison members about what our plans are there. Once we get everything solidified with the staff and the schedule and make sure everyone's happy and getting what they want out of everything. But that's something that I'm really looking forward to in the future, both, circling back to the personal training side and the Olympic lifting. It's part of our duty here to provide opportunities for people both on the staff side and on the athlete side to get what they want and put in what they want to help improve their experience and lifestyle that surrounds CrossFit. And I think that's one of our big goals in the next years, is to think deeper than just the CrossFit classes, because I think there's more to chew off there.
Yeah, I would agree. I think people, people sometimes are surprised when they're like, oh, yeah, they'll see me back there with someone. Oh, you do personal training, and then it's kind of how I pick up more clients. So, if it's something you're interested in, I think that it's something that can benefit anyone. Like, whether you're 10 years in the game or you're just starting out, it can benefit you. That goes for personal training or the Olympic lifting class.
Yep. And that's a good way to wrap it up. Again, we will put more information out there in the coming months once we can free Brian's schedule up a little bit. And, we really thank you for coming on, Bri. It was fun talking to you. He's not as scary as he looks, but at the same time, don't piss him off. He's got the combination of teddy bear and bouncer. I'm sure he's been both in his life at some point. But Brian, thanks for coming on. We'll see you around at the gym.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Herd Fit podcast. Be on the lookout for next week's episode.